The first time my wife told me she was leaving me, I smiled. Not because I was happy, not because I wasn't hurt. I smiled because she had no idea what I already knew. And more importantly, she had no idea what I owned. She thought she was leaving a broke, exhausted husband behind. She thought my best friend was taking her away from a man who had failed. She thought they were starting a new life together. But there was one thing neither of them knew: the house they were planning to move into. The company my best friend thought he was stealing from me. The bank accounts they were counting on. Everything belonged to me. And by the time they discovered the truth, it was already too late. My name is Daniel Brooks. For 8 years, I was married to Emily. She was the kind of woman everyone loved. Beautiful, charming, always smiling. The kind of person who could walk into a room full of strangers and leave with 10 new friends. And my best friend, his name was Jason. We had known each other since college. He was there when I got married. He stood beside me at my wedding. He gave a speech about how lucky Emily was to have me. I believed him. That was my first mistake. For most of our marriage, I worked constantly. I was a software engineer, not the glamorous kind you see in movies. I spent long hours in small offices, building systems, writing code, solving problems nobody else understood. Emily always complained that I worked too much. You care more about your laptop than you care about me. You never take me anywhere. Jason's husband she always stopped herself before finishing that sentence. But I knew what she meant. Jason had the expensive house, the sports car, the designer clothes. He posted pictures from expensive restaurants. He looked successful. I didn't. At least, that's what everyone thought. What Emily didn't know was that 3 years before we got married, I had created a software platform. At first, it was just a side project, something I built in my apartment after work. But eventually, a few companies started using it. Then dozens. Then hundreds. I never told anyone how successful it became. Not even Emily. Why? Because I had watched money change people, and I wanted to know who loved me before they knew what I had. So I kept everything private. The company was registered under a holding corporation. My name wasn't publicly connected to it. I lived in a normal house, drove an ordinary car, and kept working like a regular employee. To Emily, I was just Daniel, her tired husband, the man who never seemed to have enough money. And apparently, that wasn't good enough anymore. The first sign something was wrong was a perfume I didn't recognize. Emily came home late one Thursday night, almost midnight. I was sitting in the living room. She walked in quietly, too quietly. "You're still awake?" I looked at her. "Yeah." She dropped her purse on the table. "You should sleep more." There was something different about her. She looked happy, not tired, not stressed. Happy. I asked where she'd been. Out with Sarah. Sarah was her friend. The answer was perfectly normal. Except, I could smell expensive cologne on her coat. The same cologne Jason wore. I didn't say anything. I just smiled and went to bed. A week later, Jason invited us to dinner. His house was enormous. 3 floors, a private pool, a home theater, the kind of place Emily always admired. During dinner, I noticed something. Emily and Jason barely looked at each other, which would have been normal if they weren't constantly finding excuses to be in the same room. When I went to get another drink, they stopped talking. When I came back, they were discussing the weather. I didn't confront them. Instead, I started paying attention. And once you start paying attention, you notice everything. The unexplained late nights, the sudden phone password changes, the way Emily tilted her phone away from me, the messages she deleted, the work meetings that happened on weekends. And then, one night, I found something. Emily had fallen asleep on the couch. Her phone was beside her. A notification appeared. I wasn't trying to look. At least, that's what I told myself. But then I saw the name. Jason. The message preview contained only 5 words. "I can't wait anymore." My entire body went cold. I picked up the phone. The screen was locked. I stared at my wife. She was sleeping peacefully, like nothing was wrong, like our entire marriage wasn't quietly collapsing behind my back. I put the phone down and walked into the kitchen. For the next 2 hours, I sat alone in the dark. I could have woken her up. I could have confronted her. I could have called Jason. Instead, I did something they never expected. I started investigating. And what I discovered over the next few days was far worse than cheating. Because Jason wasn't just having an affair with my wife. He was planning to take everything from me that didn't confront Emily. I didn't call Jason. And I didn't ask either of them to explain the message. Because I had learned something important. When people think you know nothing, they show you everything. So I waited and watched. The next morning, Emily acted completely normal. She made coffee, asked me if I had slept well, then kissed me on the cheek before leaving for work. I stood in the kitchen, watching the woman I had loved for 8 years walk out the door. The strange thing was, I didn't feel rage. Not yet. I felt something colder. Suspicion. I needed proof. Not just because I wanted the truth. Because I knew one thing about Jason. He was too careful to leave evidence lying around. If I accused him without proof, he would deny everything, and Emily would probably believe him. So I decided to let them believe that I was completely clueless. For the next 3 weeks, I became the husband they thought they could fool. I worked late. I came home tired. I apologized for not spending enough time with Emily. I even pretended to be grateful when Jason invited me to dinner. The entire time, I was watching, and slowly, the pieces began to connect. Jason had started a new company 2 years earlier, a consulting firm. At least, that's what he told everyone. But when I looked deeper, I found something strange. His company had received several large investments from a private fund, a fund with no obvious public owner. The same fund had recently purchased several properties, including one that Emily had been looking at online. I remembered seeing it on her laptop. A beautiful luxury house, 5 bedrooms, private pool, a massive backyard. She had bookmarked the listing. At the time, I thought she was just dreaming. I was wrong. She wasn't dreaming. She was planning. One night, I came home early. Emily wasn't there. Her car was parked outside, but she wasn't inside the house. I called her. No answer. Then I noticed something. Her laptop was open on the kitchen counter. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. A message notification appeared on the screen. Once Daniel signs, the transfer will be complete. My heart stopped. What transfer? I read the next message. He won't suspect anything. He thinks the company is still losing money. Then another message appeared. After the divorce, everything becomes ours. I stared at the screen. Everything. They weren't just planning an affair. They were planning to take my company, my assets, my future. And the worst part? They thought I was broke. I finally understood why Emily had been pushing me to sign documents. Why she kept saying things like, "You should let me handle the finances. Why do you need to know every detail? It's just paperwork." One document she had given me was supposedly related to our mortgage, but I had never signed it. I had taken it to my attorney instead. He had discovered something disturbing. It wasn't a mortgage document. It was an authorization, allowing certain assets to be transferred into a company controlled by Emily. I had quietly rejected it, but I never told her. I wanted to know, what would she do next? The answer came 3 days later. Emily came home crying. Real tears. At least, they looked real. She sat across from me. "We need to talk." I turned off the television. "What happened?" She stared at the floor. "I don't think I'm happy anymore." There it was. The sentence people use when they've already made their decision. I stayed silent. She continued. "You work all the time. We don't have the life I want. I feel like we're roommates." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because she had rehearsed this speech. I could see it. She had probably practiced it in the car. Maybe even with Jason. I looked at her. "Is there someone else?" For half a second, her face changed. Then she shook her head. "No." The lie came so easily. That was the moment something inside me died. Not because she cheated. Because she could look directly into my eyes and lie without hesitation. Then she said something unexpected. "I think we should take a break." I nodded. "Okay." She blinked. "Okay." I stood up. "If that's what you want." She looked confused. She had expected a fight. Crying. Desperation. Maybe. Me begging her to stay. Instead, I simply agreed. And that scared her. Because people who plan to leave you usually want to feel like they won. They want you to chase them. They want proof that they still have power over you. I gave her nothing. That night, Emily packed a suitcase. Before leaving, she looked at me. "Where am I supposed to go?" I shrugged. "Maybe stay with a friend." She hesitated, then said, "Jason said I could stay with him." I looked at her. For the first time, she realized she had said too much. The room became completely silent. I didn't react. I just nodded. "Of course he did." Her face went pale. "Daniel." I raised my hand. "Don't." She started crying. "I can explain." I looked at the woman I had loved for 8 years. "No. You can leave." She stood there, waiting for me to stop her. I didn't. She picked up her suitcase, walked out the front door, and drove directly to my best friend's house. The moment her car disappeared, I made one phone call. To my attorney. Start the process. He asked, "Are you sure?" I looked at the empty driveway. Completely. Then I made another call. This time, to the private bank managing my company's assets. Freeze every account connected to the pending transfer. There was a pause. "Mr. Brooks, do you want us to notify your wife?" I smiled. "No. Let them think the transfer went through." Because Emily and Jason believed they were about to take everything from me. They had no idea. They were walking directly into the trap I had already prepared. For the next 10 days, I heard nothing from Emily. Not one phone call. Not one message. Not even a question about how I was doing. That told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't worried about me. She was waiting. Waiting for the transfer. Waiting for the divorce. Waiting to start her new life with Jason. And the funniest part? She believed she had already won. Meanwhile, I was quietly preparing for the moment the truth came out. My attorney, Michael, had spent years handling the legal structure of my company. He knew everything. The holding companies, the investments, the properties, the accounts, the real ownership structure. And most importantly, he knew that Emily and Jason had never been anywhere near my actual assets. The company they thought they were taking wasn't even the company I owned. It was a shell, a carefully designed layer. They had spent months trying to steal something that was worth almost nothing, while the real company, the real money, the real assets, were hidden behind 3 separate legal entities, all controlled by me. But I didn't want to expose everything yet. I wanted them to believe their plan had worked. So I did something risky. I gave them exactly what they wanted. A document. The transfer agreement. It appeared to move ownership of one of my companies into an entity controlled by Emily. She signed immediately. No hesitation. No questions. Neither did Jason. They were so confident. They didn't even bother having their own lawyer review the document. That was their first mistake. The second was believing I was stupid. 3 days later, Emily called me. Her voice sounded completely different. Confident. Almost cheerful. "Daniel, I think we should start the divorce process." I leaned back in my chair. "Okay." She paused. "That's it. What else should I say?" She laughed nervously. "I just thought this would be harder." I looked out the window. "Maybe it doesn't have to be." There was silence. Then she said, "I want the house." I almost smiled. Of course she did. Fine. And the cars. Fine. And half of the business. There it was. The real reason. I stayed silent for a few seconds. Then asked, "Which business?" She hesitated. "The company." I pretended to think. "Okay." Her voice changed. "You agree?" "Yes." She sounded almost shocked. "Daniel, don't worry. You'll get what you want." I could hear the smile in her voice. She had no idea what was coming. That evening, Jason called me. My former best friend. The man sleeping with my wife. He didn't sound guilty. He sounded excited. "Daniel. Hey. How are you holding up?" I almost laughed. But I played along. "Not great." He sighed dramatically. "I know this is hard. Emily is going through a lot too." I stared at the wall. "Yeah." Then he said, "She deserves to be happy." I finally understood. People don't always betray you because they hate you. Sometimes, they betray you because they believe they deserve more than you can give them. Jason thought he was rescuing Emily. Emily thought Jason was giving her the life I couldn't. And both of them believed I was the poor loser standing in their way. The divorce hearing was scheduled 6 weeks later. During that time, Emily moved into Jason's house. The same house where we had once had dinner together. She posted photos online. New restaurants. Luxury vacations. Romantic sunsets. They wanted everyone to know. They were happy. I never reacted. Not once. But I watched. And slowly, their perfect life started cracking. Because Jason had a problem. He was drowning in debt. The company he owned was losing money. The investors who had financed his lifestyle were demanding returns. And the property Emily wanted? It wasn't his. It was owned by one of my investment companies. They didn't know that. I had purchased it months earlier. Through another holding company. The moment they moved in, they were living in my house. Then came the day of the divorce hearing. Emily arrived with Jason. They walked into the courthouse together. He was wearing an expensive suit. She wore a designer dress. They looked like a couple who had already won. I arrived alone. No expensive clothes. No flashy car. Just a dark suit and a folder. Emily looked at me with something that almost looked like pity. "Are you okay?" I smiled. "I'm fine." She lowered her voice. You don't have to make this ugly. I looked at Jason, then back at her. I'm not the one who made it ugly. Her smile disappeared. Inside the courtroom, her attorney presented the financial documents. The house, the cars, the business, the investments, everything she believed she was entitled to. For several seconds, nobody in the courtroom moved. Emily stared at me as if she was looking at a stranger. Maybe, for the first time, she was the husband she thought was broke, the man she thought she had outgrown, the person she believed she could manipulate, had never been who she thought he was. The judge looked at the documents again. Mr. Brooks, are you saying the assets listed in these documents are not marital property? My attorney answered calmly. Correct, Your Honor. The majority of these assets were acquired before the marriage through separate corporate entities. Emily suddenly stood up. That's not true. Everyone turned toward her. She pointed at me. He lied to me. I looked at her. No, I simply never told you how much I owned. She shook her head violently. You made me believe we were struggling. I replied quietly. You never asked. The courtroom became completely silent. Then Emily's attorney whispered something to her. Her face changed. She turned toward me. You knew? I didn't answer. You knew about Jason. Still, I said nothing. Her voice became louder. You knew everything. I looked at her. Not at first, but eventually. Yes. She stared at me with tears in her eyes. Then why didn't you stop me? I finally answered. Because I wanted to see how far you'd go. That sentence destroyed her. Not because it was cruel, because it was true. The judge reviewed the financial documents. The house was mine. The cars were mine. The company Emily believed she was taking was worth almost nothing. And the real company? It was completely protected. Emily walked away with only the assets legally considered marital property, a fraction of what she had expected. But there was one more surprise. The transfer agreement she had signed was completely valid. The shell company was now hers, including its liabilities. And there were plenty of them. Millions in debt, contracts, lawsuits, unpaid obligations. She had signed everything without reading it, because she was too focused on winning. Outside the courthouse, Emily caught up with me. Daniel, wait. I stopped. She was crying. Please. I turned around. I don't know what you want me to say. You can't just do this to me. I stared at her. I didn't do this to you. You did this to yourself. She stepped closer. I made a mistake. I shook my head. No. You made hundreds of choices. Every lie. Every message. Every time you came home smelling like him. Every time you looked me in the eye and pretended nothing was wrong. She covered her face. I loved you. I looked at her quietly. Maybe. But you loved the life you thought I could give you more. She didn't answer. Because she knew. I was right. Then Jason appeared. He looked furious. Not at Emily. At me. You ruined everything. I stared at him. No. You did. He stepped toward me. You think you're better than us? I smiled sadly. No. I just know the difference between wanting something and believing you're entitled to it. He clenched his fists. For a moment, I thought he might hit me. Then he looked around. Cameras. People. Lawyers. He walked away, without saying another word. The next few months were brutal for both of them. Jason's business collapsed. His investors discovered financial irregularities. Several of his accounts were frozen. The luxury house they had moved into, they had to leave. Because it was mine. I didn't throw them out immediately. I gave them 30 days. Not because I felt sorry for them. Because I wanted to prove something. I didn't need to destroy people to move on. I simply needed to stop allowing them to destroy me. Eventually, Emily sent me one final letter. She apologized. For the affair. For the lies. For trying to take what she hadn't earned. She wrote, I thought you were the man who had nothing. Then came the sentence that stayed with me. I never realized you were the only person who had everything I actually needed. I never responded. Not because I hated her, but because some doors should stay closed. A year later, I sold the house, moved to another city, and started a new chapter of my life. The company continued growing. I hired people I trusted, built new products, and for the first time, I stopped hiding who I was. Not because I needed anyone's approval, but because I finally understood something. Money doesn't reveal who people are. It reveals who they were pretending not to be. Emily and Jason thought they were stealing my life. But the truth was, the moment they betrayed me, they lost access to it. I didn't lose my wife. I lost someone who had already decided to leave. I didn't lose my best friend. I discovered I never had one. And I didn't lose everything. I finally learned what was actually mine. So I want to ask you honestly, if you discovered your wife was cheating with your best friend, and they were secretly planning to take everything you owned, would you expose them immediately? Or would you stay quiet and let them reveal their entire plan? Tell me your answer in the comments.